Life is a ride. Life is a ride. Life is a ride. Life is a ride along. Welcome to the experience. Welcome to the journey. Welcome to the journey. A movement. This is Ridealong Live, where
Hey, did you know that the census is due this year on April 1st? And guess what? This time we can finally count as Caribbean. This year, all you have to do is 1. Check the race box, and 2. Write in your country of birth or ancestry. You can answer by the paper form, online, or by phone. Everybody counts in Census 2020. So count as Caribbean. Yes, we count.
What's up, Ridealong family? What's up? What's up? Welcome to the ride. Welcome to Mondays on the Ride. Let me first apologize, right, for the slightly late start, but it was necessary. I was finishing up something, and it was necessary. I had to go over time a little bit with my previous engagement. All right. Anyway, I am here. You're here. How you guys doing? Welcome to the ride. I think the first person I saw today was Lydia James. Lydia James! I share. Thank you so much, Lydia James, for sharing the program. Thank you. Big up yourself, Lydia James. Natasha Charles, big up yourself. The keyword today, guys, is I share. Yeah, the keyword today is I share, meaning that you share the program, you put it on your page, and you comment I share. All right? So share the program. I share and put it on your page, because today we're going to have a really good discussion. I'm actually very excited about the discussion today. We have Mr. Jerry Edwin, attorney at law. He is the lawyer representing the young man that was recently shot in Grenada, in Guave. We're going to have an extended conversation about him. But Mr. Edwin is also the lawyer that represented Mr. Akim Andrew. Remember Akim Andrew? So we have a lot to discuss. And also, we're going to talk about some topical issues, get the lawyer perspective on some topical issue that's in the news right now. So it's a whole set of things we're talking about today. A whole set, a galloper thing, a fine bag of thing, a cocos bag of thing, real thing. Real thing we're talking about today, guys. Real thing. A whole bag of thing, a parade of thing, just thing. How you doing, Melinda Campbell? Melinda Campbell, how you doing? Welcome to the ride. Hope you're doing fine. Who else we have? Alice McIntosh Campbell. How you doing, Alice McIntosh Campbell? Thank you and welcome to the ride. Deanne Fraser, of course, our moderator. We have in the back end handling thing our producer, Lois JJ. She's handling all the behind the scenes stuff, you know. A lot goes on to the show, you know. It's not like, you know, a whole set of people working in this thing here, you know. So Lynn is going to be handling our moderation, our producing in the back end. Big up yourself. Who else? Deanne shared, yes. Big up yourself. Jackie Chaitan, my friend. How's Michael? Say hi to Michael for me. Who else? Lydia, I see Marilyn. Vic! How you doing? Oh, you gotta stop the fighting, you know. Too much fighting. I find every time I look at that, you and Peter fighting back and forth or whatever. Anyway, it's good to have good discussion on debates. It's actually healthy to have good discussion on debates, especially when you could learn after the fact. Right? So it's healthy. It's healthy to have this discussion on debates. You just don't let it get too disrespectful, guys. You know, you can have a conversation that doesn't get disrespectful. And that's why we look at all the comments, and you know, we like to see when people talking about and deliberating on a topic. It brings out the best in everybody. Who else we have? Barbara, big up yourself. I share. Thank you so much, Barbara. Big up yourself. Happy belated birthday, Service. Yeah, happy belated birthday to you, Service. Hope you're doing well. All right, guys. Sherry George, what's the topic today? All right. So here's what we're going to be talking about today, right? I'm sure that you guys are aware of the recent incident that happened yesterday in Guave that led to protest. We saw it, it unfolded on social media. The people in Guave was obviously upset. Today we're going to learn why and how the whole thing started, because we have the lawyer representing the young man that was shot today. He is here with us. And also we're going to give you guys an opportunity to call in just a little bit later. Let me make sure the phone lines are open so you guys could call in as well. So let's go right ahead and introduce my guest for today. He is Mr. Jerry Edwin. How you doing, Mr. Edwin, sir?
I'm just living, brother. Good
Yeah.
evening to you and your guests,
Hey?
and your friends and your audience as far and wide, wherever they are, especially those in diaspora.
Yeah. We're doing good. How you doing? How you doing in this quarantine time, my brother?
Like I said, we're living, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah, I say we survived. We survived up to July here in New York. So we could we will survive. We'll see it through. We're doing our thing. We're doing our thing. So, Mr. Jerry Edwin, attorney at law. I've heard a lot about you. I've followed some of your cases, and I've seen a lot of decisions you made in terms of clients that you represent. I kind of understand a little bit about your perspective, but today's opportunity to learn a little bit more about you, and also to learn a little bit more about the case, the very topical case that is what happened yesterday, and you are the lawyer representing that, so we're going to learn about that. But before we do, sir, just give us a little synopsis about who is Mr. Jerry Edwin.
Oh, well, I'm an old GBSS boy from the 1970s. I got a full education by the time I was 16. So when I came to the United States, all I had to do was grow old and get degrees, which I did. I spent some years in the U.S. military, and I remember I was planning to come back home in October 1983. I had just come out of the service. I had my bags packed, and I'm driving down 6th Avenue. I had a Volvo, a green Volvo station wagon, brand new. I couldn't wait to see it come off the pier in St. George's. And I heard the voice of a man who would really be my mentor over the next 15 years. His name is Samori Marksman. Mm-hmm. And I heard Samori on WLIB, 1190 AM.
Yes.
Saying that the Prime Minister of Grenada, Maurice Bishop, was under house arrest.
Mm-hmm.
That changed my life, because after I screeched on my brakes at 6th Avenue, I think somewhere around West 4th, after I screeched on my brakes, I made a U-turn almost, went around the block and headed right up to the station, WLIB. And I met Samori, and the rest is history. I worked for about 20 years as a broadcaster I joined the ANC International. I worked with community organizations. We were in the forefront of the police brutality movement, what we call the No Justice, No Peace movement. And I want to remind people that, oh, look, the brothers, but the December 12th movement out of Bed-Stuy, Sister Viola Plummer and others, they are responsible for that slogan. No justice, no peace. Straight out of Bed-Stuy. So we worked with another strong fighter for Pan-African issues, Brother Ilambe Brath. And I was telling my wife last night, I said, I remember in the mid-1980s, we would print 50,000 flyers to come to a program in Harlem where we would discuss international issues. Forefront in the forefront, and foremost among them was the anti-apartheid movement, the freedom of Nelson Mandela. I would print 50,000 flyers, and we would have more people in the speakers table than we would in the audience. And it didn't stop us, because the next week we went out and printed another 50,000 flyers.
Mm-hmm.
But among the 5 people in the audience, Junior, there would be one reporter from the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
And we began to see the opinions of these 5 or 10 people reflected in American media and international media.
Mm-hmm.
And soon we had many more people in the audience, whether it's at 41st Street between 7th and 8th Avenue, or at the Harriet Tubman School in Harlem. I could tell you, I've seen what perseverance and belief in struggle.
So a military man turned media man turned attorney. What that legal edge? Where did you get that intuition, intonation to wanna be a part of
straight out of the Black struggle movement?
Right.
I always thought that after Nelson became free, and I was on David Dinkins appointed myself and about 50 other people in New York to be part of the Nelson Mandela Reception Committee when Nelson came to New York in 1992, sorry. And my thought was, South Africa needs me, right? I am from Grenada, but I had, in 42 years, I'd only been back to Grenada, I think, twice. So I thought I would be moving to South Africa because the country had just become free. My best friends were South Africans, my closest colleagues over the last 20 years. I mean, that's the movement that I knew. It was the Southern African struggle. And as fate would have it, I was also, I should say, my expertise is actually in banking, anti-money laundering. And I got a call I'd worked with the State Department and Treasury and so on, just looking at dirty banks and so forth. And as fate would have it, I got a call to come to a place in the Caribbean. And I remember the recruiter on the other side saying, you'd have to go to Jamaica, the Aruba, and I don't know if you know of a little place in the Caribbean. It's called Grenada. You ever heard of it, Jerry? And that changed my life. And before I knew it, I was back where my navel string is buried, and I could not be happier.
Wow. I guess that changed, that kind of dictate how you make your decisions now. You are one of the more talked about defense attorney. You have handled some of the top cases in Grenada. And even now you're handling one of the top case to date. What makes your decision on who you should represent or who you represent or what case you take on as a defense attorney?
The truth is, Brother George, that all cases are big cases, because whether you work for the small, old, poor lady across in Willis or in, I don't know, Moya or Soubise or Duquesne, who her only worry is that someone has planted a fence that is encroaching on her property, or whether you represent a mother who on a Sunday morning thought she'd be packing a picnic basket to Bathway instead of caring for her son shot by a policeman who's lying on a hospital bed. I think it takes the same commitment.
Yeah.
I think it takes the same commitment.
Have you thought, or have you been in a position where you made a decision to take on a particular case, and it so happened that you felt like you made a wrong or a bad decision?
That's a good question. I can't say that. Well, the role of particularly lawyer at the criminal defense bar. It's very interesting. I have been educated by people like Colin Moore and Alton Maddox, William Consular, Chokwe Lumumba. Chokwe is the former mayor of Mississippi, from the All African People's Liberation Party, whose slogan is "Free the Land." So at the criminal bar, I always tell my senior in Grenada, Brother Anselm Clouden, that we really are human rights lawyers. We are not driven by pecuniary or monetary gain. I mean, yes, you have to make a living, you have to keep your lights on and pay your staff. But what drives you is that justice, that the state, maybe be more precise, the obligation of the state is to prove its case. If the state is just allowed to just continue down its merry way, aided by police and prosecutors and a budget that cannot be matched by private lawyers or private citizens, then we have dictatorship.
Right.
And so, I mean, I take cases where persons cannot afford to pay, where nobody wants to represent them.
Right.
I remember Bill Counselor saying, I remember Bill Counselor represented the mafia leader in New York. And there were a number of us, myself, neophyte at the time, saying, well, how could Counselor represent a mafia leader? In fact, this guy was a notorious killer in the mafia. And Counselor pointed out that everybody needs a defense.
Right. Well, I asked that question specifically because in looking through some of the decisions, some of the clients you choose to represent, I stumbled upon a name. I think his name is Batiste. Right. That was a case that you did.
Yeah.
His name is Randy Batiste. I want to just show a quick clip and let's talk a little bit more about it on the other side.
Yes.
Check this out, guys.
Aware of the article in the Grenada Informer, last week's issue, in which the headline stated that I abandoned my client. Well, nothing could be further from the truth.
Local attorney Jerry Edwin, as he defended claims made in a local newspaper. Edwin says he has fulfilled his duty to his client Randy Batiste, despite claims that he has left the client midstream. One day after being released from Her Majesty's prison, the client, Randy Batiste, was again in contention with the law, having attacked a nurse on the hospital steps. The December 2018 incident left the nurse in need of medical care. Edwin says if he says his client deserves more time in jail, it's because he does. Edwin went on to add that the judge handed down a 14-year sentence on Batiste last week after he pleaded guilty to robbery with violence for the incident.
My client is entitled, as I told the court, to a reduction in the sentence for which he would have ordinarily received. The judge would have given him a sentence of 21 years. So to say I abandoned him would be incorrect. But I infused a dose of reality into the court proceedings. I am not going to stand and pretend that a man with a 15 conviction record deserves a slap on the wrist. I'm not going to make that argument to the court. I keep it real, and I keep the safety of Grenadian citizens real.
Describing his client as a career offender, Edwin says he does not value his freedom. Inasmuch as he represents his client, his previous conviction will not be hidden from the court. As an attorney, he says he has a responsibility to both client as well as other citizens.
When I stand as a defense lawyer, I represent my client, of course, but I am a citizen. I want public safety. I want women to be safe. I will not appeal. If my client offered me $1 million, I'm not going to appeal this case. So I didn't abandon him. I asked the court for justice, and I think he got justice that he deserved. If I say my client deserves a term in jail, it's because he does.
Meanwhile, Edwin says the publisher and editor of the newspaper who printed the erroneous headline have advised him that they will be printing an apology to him in the next edition. Christina John, GBN News.
That was a clip there from GBN News. So my question to you, sir, this is a lot. I can see a lot of principle in making that decision, but also contradiction. As a defense attorney, people might say your job is to protect and to continue to protect your client. A lot of people might say in this particular case with John Batiste, as was printed in the newspaper, and the question posed to you, was that a matter of neglect and you making that decision for your own self rather than defending the client wholly and so?
It's an interesting question. Randy had a record, and I think for lay people sometimes do not understand the process inside the court. And before I became a lawyer, I certainly did not understand it. Randy has a record that involved rape of an 82-year-old woman. He had a record of violence against women that it's not a he came before the court with multiple incidents of violence against women. One day, and for example, before Randy was released, I would see him at the prison and we would speak, and he told me he couldn't wait to get out. I agree with all the inmates. In fact, I do everything I can to encourage them to lead different lives when they get out of prison. I saw Randy the day he got out, the morning. And in the afternoon, I heard he was arrested. Didn't think anything of it. I was in the court and he was being sentenced. He was about to be sentenced. And the court asked, I was on another matter, and the court asked, who is standing for Randy? And Randy turned to me and he said, Mr. Edwin, can you represent me? I said, okay, Randy, I'll represent you. And the court went through the sentencing and they gave me the disclosures, meaning the papers, the charges, the guilty plea, because he pled guilty. A lot of that probably was, that sequence was not omitted. Randy pled guilty to assaulting this nurse. And often lawyers would offer what is called mitigation whenever there is a guilty plea. And it is important to be forthright to the court during a plea of mitigation. In fact, the court appreciates frankness, both the remorse of the defendant and from his counsel, a true rendering of who this man or this convicted person is. I asked Randy through the court, I said, Randy, where are your friends? Tell us, because you have just come out of serving a long sentence. Why would you want to go back? Where are your friends? Randy Batiste pointed to the prison. He pointed to Richmond Hill. He said, that's where my friends are. And the judge and I looked at each other, other counsel in the court, we looked at each other because we'd never seen that. Who wants to go back to jail? No, the paper said that I abandoned Randy Batiste. They did not quite understand. Many people told me that I should have brought a defamation suit, but time is short. I don't want to sue papers for getting it wrong. I'd rather just go ahead and do my work and let that speak for itself.
Mm-hmm.
Randy was sentenced to 21 years in jail because the court looked at his record. It's a sordid record by a young man who has more convictions than his age. And she sentenced him to 21 years, and I intervened and I said, Judge, no. Remember his guilty plea. Look at what he's entitled to. And on top of that, I'm asking for a further reduction because how does the Brother George, the good book says, all have sinned and come short. Everybody, every last one of us is out.
But adhering to knowing the fact that he has that characteristic, he is that type of person, but still defending the fact that he shouldn't serve out the time. Are you by yourself aiding and abetting with his negligence as an individual?
Well, you have to follow the law. And the law says if a man pleads guilty, that's in the books. It's in the federal code. It's in the New York code. I have an office in New York. I practice in New York. I'm admitted in New York. I went to St. John's University School of Law in Jamaica. That if, same here in Grenada and in the Commonwealth, in every common law jurisdiction, you plead guilty, the court must give you a third or more of your sentence. I am going to say that he was entitled to that under the law. And I'm happy to do that. That is the law. And the law is no respecter of persons, whether he's a rabbi or a rapist. That person is entitled to 1/3. And the law was what I asked the judge to please make sure she did it. And I also asked for him to be counseled. And she made that order as well during the time that he's in prison. I see Randy every time I go up there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the show is not to speak specifically on that case. I just wanted to find out about the decision-making process when acquisitioning or obtaining clients, which brings me to the next case that I want to talk about. Here we have a young man. We're talking about Mr. Akim Andrew, right? A young man who reported, I'm not sure if he pled, I don't think he pled guilty for it, but it's reports after reports. There's countless reports of him pretending to be some person of some medical practitioner. There was some sort of evidence. I don't know what evidential information that presented itself inside of the court.
Let me clear up Akim Andrew's case.
Right.
Akim is a young man who is now 22, and when he was 17 or 18, he worked as an intern while he was in secondary school in St. John's Secondary, what we call Shapers School. He worked in the Guelph police station. He was a very good police cadet and intern. Somehow, Akim took it into his mind that he was a full-blown policeman. And for many months, he pretended. You see, he stole a uniform and pretended to be a policeman with the notebook, the cap, you name it. And he would go out, not make arrests, but file reports on persons who were breaking the law. That was right. That was his first. I mean, now Dr. Panshu, our resident psychologist at the local juvenile center, described Akim as, in part, he has a social disorder. Other psychiatrists have described him as being narcissistic because Akim has pretended to be every kind of professional almost in Grenada, an insurance broker, and he has succeeded. And he even, the doctor, he even treated the magistrate's mother. And he had a stethoscope, and he'd go around, and people would line up to come to his office. He would say, "No, I only do home visits." Akim is the kind of young man who, if you drop $100 note, if you drop $500 in your wallet, Akim would run after you and
Right.
say, "Sir, you dropped $500. Here it is." And you would want to say, "Young man, here is a $20 bill for your kindness." Akim is a kind of young man that would say, "No, no, 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 no. No, that's fine. You don't have to give me anything." But I have this proposition I think you might be interested in. He is quite a study. I think that further psychological investigation and analysis of this young man is required because, Junior, he has now pretended to be a health inspection officer attached to the Ministry of Health. So
the fact that you're not saying that he did not pretend to be these people. He's guilty of that. That is your position.
He has pled guilty to pretending to be a policeman, a medical doctor, an insurance broker, I think a building contractor. He's if he stays in the prison long enough, he might pretend to be the commissioner of prison. So
it's not funny. I'm sorry, I'm laughing, but it's funny at the same time. So you chose to represent Akim. What's the story you take in the court?
Yes, Akim needs psychological intervention, and Dr. Panchu said that. And I want to publicly say that the day he said that, when Akim pled guilty to being a medical practitioner, a doctor, I mean, I went crazy in the courtroom, and I was saying, "No, how could you say that? He could be reformed. The young man could." And Panchu says, "Mr. Edwin," very calmly, he said, "Mr. Edwin, that young man will be back in this court, not very long." And I went through my histrionics, and I said, "No, never." But Dr. Panchu was correct, because Akim now is before the court again, and I am going to. Some people no, I don't think the prison could reform Akim Andrews. I firmly don't believe
Right.
that, and I think there has to be some creative way.
Right.
But I will ask the magistrate. He's a young man. He's only 22. Mind you, he has 2 young children. But Akim he has no violent bone in his body. He is the sweetest young man. But there's a narcissistic issue, I think, that a psychologist or a psychiatrist can help us solve. So I'm not willing to slam the door shut yet. I think that as a lawyer, I can't say for other lawyers. I can't speak for other lawyers. I bring my own sensitivity and my own world and life experience to my work.
Mhm.
And so with that in mind, I will continue to struggle so that this young man can get on the good foot. And
Right.
I don't know how we're going to do it. I'm going to ask professionals to work, and let's see how we can do it. Because
I saw you on a recent news program where there were 4 other individuals a couple other individuals that claimed that Akim Andrews fraudulently did whatever to get some funds or whatever from him, and he was defending him, saying that he was accused by association. He used that term based on what he is prone to do. People are just coming up with other things. But if he did that before, why would you still defend what he's doing now?
He hasn't been convicted. He has not been convicted. These are mere allegations before the court. The present allegation, I mean, is before the court, and he has not been convicted. He has not pled guilty. In fact, he is one of the saving graces of this young man is that when he is caught, he readily admits it. He would say, yes, I did this, I'm wrong. But he told me in this instance, he says, Mr. Edwin, I did not commit this last offense.
What was the last offense? If you could just refresh us a bit.
Sure. No, this is the offense where it is alleged he went to a woman's house, and because to see a business associate, and I hate to say this, use this kind of language on a 22-year-old, but he went to see a business associate, and the woman asked, "Who are you?" He said, "Well, I work with the Department of Health, and I am an officer, and this person owes a fee to the Ministry of Health. Now I have to do this inspection, so I need to see them, or else they'll have to pay the fee." And with a straight face, he said this, and this was in the police. This was in the disclosure. Akim has said that I said this to her because I needed this person to pay me for some work I did for them. But so he will plead guilty to that. That's why I raise it. But I will defend him because he said I never stole any money from, because there are two charges he's facing: impersonating a health officer. He'll say, yes, I did. But I never stole any money. You see, that's stealing is not in his MO. At least not yet. Not yet. The reason why I will defend this young man is because he has said, I didn't do it. And until he pleads guilty, until he is convicted, I'll stand with him. That's my job. I mean, the job of lawyers, some can take this kind of work if they want to be loved. If you're not someone who is a follower, if you're not someone who want to be embraced, welcome to the profession.
Yeah.
Because you get it from both sides.
Yeah, well, lawyers and journalists, I could tell you, I know.
Yes.
Interesting case. So at present, Akim is facing those additional charges plus those charges before that. What kind of...
No, the charges before he has pled guilty, he was given a suspended sentence. I advocated long and hard to a very patient magistrate who agreed to give him a suspended sentence for the impersonation of a medical doctor and an insurance broker. That was a 1-year suspended sentence that may be in jeopardy because of these present allegations. If he is found guilty, then on top of what he faces now, he would have to serve out the year that was suspended back in March.
Right. So it's basically prison may not be rehabilitation for him.
That is correct, Brother George. I do not see... Akim may just get better at what he does if he gets in prison, if he gets him to serve a term in prison. And I don't know. Maybe there's nothing I could do. Maybe the penologists will say that it is really punishment that will teach this young man a lesson. But I believe that perhaps, and I'll go the extra mile to explore rehabilitation through other kinds of intervention, enforced intervention in Akim's case, because clearly impersonating a doctor is funny, except that people's lives are at stake.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. It's not like he's just impersonating someone who's going and wash your car.
Exactly, precisely.
He people's life is at risk, and I've even heard situation, and you could confirm it or deny it, that he actually gave people medication.
Panadol. You got a problem? Panadol. You got a problem? Salt. He gave you a salt pill, or he gave you Panadol. He took your pressure, and then he looked deep into your eyes and say, "Mommy, you'll recover. Don't worry. Here's a Panadol."
Okay.
Serious. It was the prosecutor was really gunning for him, and I would say if I were the prosecutor, I would have taken the same position. But the magistrate heard my plea that we have a young man who is desperately in need of help, and maybe we'd have to have some kind of enforced rehabilitation, and so we could really see and dig deep into what this young man's real problems are.
Right. Folks, you're watching Right Along Live, and we're talking to attorney Jerry Edwin. Very interesting because he represents some very interesting clients as we've seen here. But he went on yet. There's this situation that happened yesterday. It's no joking matter. It's a serious issue. It involved a police shooting. And Mr. Edwin is the lawyer representing the family and the young man, the national soccer player, who was shot yesterday by police. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But this is what I want to do right now. At this juncture, I want to give folks an opportunity to call in and ask a question. I'm seeing a lot of comments in the comment section. I've seen a lot of comments. I want to give you guys an opportunity to call in. This is the number on the screen right now. The number that you call, 718-701-5720. That's 718-701-5720. Before we get an update as to what Mr. Jerry thinks about this particular issue, even regarding the Evan Smith issue, and also the issue involving the police involved shooting yesterday. Before we get into that, we want to just get you guys input on what we spoke about so far. 718-701-5720. 718-701-5720. That's what we're talking here right now with Mr. Jerry Edwin. While we wait on this calls to come in, Mr. Edwin, I want to touch on this very topical issue. I know that you are not okay. Well, let me take this call and then we'll touch on it. Caller, you live? Where are you calling us from?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. Mr. Edwin, are you hearing the caller?
Yes, sir. I could hear the man.
Okay, go ahead.
He's calling from Chocolate City. Yes.
Chocolate City. Go ahead, caller.
Well, I'm calling from Chocolate City, and you're also a GDS fan.
Indeed.
I heard the press conference, and I just had one question, and it has to relate to your stance as it relates to the police. I guess the investigation has to take place. But from what I heard, it didn't seem to me that the family showed any violence other than words based on what you said.
Yeah, caller, you way ahead. You way ahead of us. We ain't even get there yet. I want to take it in chronological order. So you're way ahead of us. We're gonna talk about that issue.
I didn't hear you say that, brother.
Yeah, no problem. So call back
right,
a little bit later. We'll get that question in. Caller, you live? Right along. Where you calling us from?
West Palm Beach, Florida. Good afternoon.
West Palm Beach, Florida. Go ahead, Florida.
Yes, and good afternoon, Council.
Good afternoon,
yes,
sir.
Julia. I happen to totally agree. I just want to speak about is it Batiste case? I think it is. Yeah, the chubby young man who seemed to be having some issues, and in my opinion, sending him to prison would not rehabilitate that young man, in the sense that it would only cultivate and create some other stuff in his head. He's really going to go up there and learn more stuff. He need mental help to and we got to figure in Grenada how can we put things in place to accommodate that young man. Prison is not for him. You know what I mean? Prison is only going to make that young man worse. So social workers in Grenada, we need to figure what it is we can do to better him. And not only him, there are other people, other youths in Grenada going through similar stuff, and we show them the system that, and we create monsters. We keep recreating the monsters. You know what I mean?
Right.
I hate to call him a monster. He's a young man who needs help. But what I'm trying to say is that prison is not for people like that.
Right. Okay. What do you think about that, Mr. Edwin? Thank you, caller.
Well, there are, at last count, there are a number of persons who are who have been determined by the medical experts not to be fit to stand trial. There's a case in Jamaica, in fact, where a man spent 44 years in jail, and because of his medical condition, his unfitness to stand trial, he actually died in prison.
Mm.
We have our challenges here with the mental health infrastructure. I think that we could be like Holland, for example, and only send the most violent people to jail. But I don't think the sensibility here is that acute, shall I say, that it's prison for everybody. Once you're found guilty, I mean, I shouldn't be so callous in saying that. That's not fair. But I would think that someone who is a repeat offender of the same kind of offense, I
Right.
have a new battle in trying to convince the prosecutors that he does not belong in jail. So we have some resources available to us, and I'll fight. I'll take that struggle to the courthouse rather than
Got
here.
you. Got you. We got another caller on the line. We're gonna take this last caller before we move on to the next segment of the program. Caller, you like where you calling us from?
I'm calling from New York.
Go ahead, caller.
Yes. I want. I would like to know if Akim is aware that he needs help, or has he admitted that he can have help?
That's a brilliant question. That is the question. That is the question. So there are, in social disorder psychoses, what you have is denial, and you probably, I think in Akim's case, there's a lot of denial and an overdose of narcissism. That's what the experts have said. I think Akim believes in his own mind that he is fine, that there's nothing wrong, that when he is ready, he can pull out another identity, and it will be fine. If he gets caught, he admits, and if he doesn't, he just moves on. So there has to be in this young man, of course, with any kind of medical intervention, I think the patient has to be aware and admit the illness, because unless and until he admits something is wrong, I'm throwing daisies in the ocean, right? So there has to be a recognition by this young man. He's a mature person. Well, he's a young, mature person. But unless and until, and I want to thank the caller for that, unless and until this young man recognizes and comes to grips with what his problem is, I think that it's a non-starter for me as a defense lawyer.
All right, caller. All right, yeah. All right. So let's move on. I want to talk about this other topical issue here in regards to this Evan Smith case. I know that you are not the lawyer that's representing either one of the persons here, but obviously you're in the field and you will have an opinion on it. What's your opinion on this particular case here?
Well, I would tell you, Evan Smith and his wife were my clients on a civil matter, and I was caught completely off guard when this matter actually came to my attention.
Was that in this civil matter, in this case here, or previously?
No, previously.
Okay.
Previously, Evans was my client. My view on this, in a nutshell, is that this had no imprimatur, not one scintilla of race was involved here. I remember when my dog got killed. I was in Prospect Park, and my dog ran away and ran down Prospect Park West, and a car hit that dog. Brother George, I was in therapy for 3 months. Right? I went to therapy for my pet. Now, many people will laugh at that. It's people, we have become attached to our animals to a degree that is, one would say, irrational. But that's a fact. And especially in cities, you grow attached to your animals. Here in Grenada, not just people who are non-Grenadians. In fact, many Grenadians now I see with hybrid dogs on leashes, and they are attached. They have that attachment to the animals. Notwithstanding that, we had a person who was a dog owner who acted apparently like a jackass when their dog was killed. And I think that's the end of it. No, I was called on the day of the protest to say that this protest is happening and Black Lives Matter. And I was shocked because on June 8th, myself and another colleague led a protest in front of the U.S. Embassy in support of Grenada's diaspora, who Trump said he would unleash the U.S. military on. In other words, he said, I'm putting the military in the streets. And from my experience, I know I have friends who are Grenadians who marched on Flatbush Avenue. I know that I have been to the Capitol in the 1980s and have been arrested for protests. I've been involved in closing the Brooklyn Bridge. Right? I know what racism is. I've been tear gassed, handcuffed, pulled out of my car, on my block in front of my house on East 55th Street. I can't tell you how many times. So I know the color of racism, having been involved in the anti-apartheid struggle. I know it, and it's not here. So I think many people were, let me just say, the people who were afraid to join that protest outside of the U.S. Embassy, who were afraid of possibly what the reaction would be. And to his credit, let me say the U.S. top diplomat here thought that he applauded us because he said, yes, peaceful protests, and you have to stand for rights. You know, this is a rare moment in the world. We are in a space Martin Luther King Jr. called the zeitgeist has arisen, where the spirit is walking through all over the globe, where the fight for universal freedom and justice is in places like Australia and New Zealand and Japan. In Grenada, we cannot say that there is any systemic racism. It does not exist.
Someone just made a post here, and you could react to it. It says, Junior, tell Mr. Edwin that the Caucasian man who operated the business in Clarkscourt, in Clarkscourt Bay Area, said that Mr. Covenant has racist tendencies, alleged racist tendencies, and a bad attitude. Another restaurant owner also testified to his racial behavior. They say that Mr. Edwin is not aware of the facts. We'll get back to him. Guys, 718-701-5720. On the other side of this interview, we'll take your calls again. Mr. Edwin just took a quick break there. Let's see. He'll be back soon.
I'm sorry. I still operate a law practice. Please forgive me.
No problem. Yes. So people are saying and testifying to the fact that Mr. Kavanagh experienced some level of racism. We cannot independently verify that.
Of course.
So by you saying that, are you saying that based on how you feel or something that you know personally about the person, Mr. Kavanagh?
Junior, Brother George, if Mr. Kavanaugh had confronted Evans and said, "You black son of a bitch," I'm using the racist the language of racism.
Right.
You N-word. You, who knows? We know the language. We know the
Right.
attitude. Then, of course, that's objective fact. He did not in this incident. So if someone who comes along later now and says, "Oh, this guy has tendencies to what," that's self-serving, and it has no bearing on this case, because the conduct of this man during the confrontation with Evan Smith over the death of his dog had nothing to do with race, and if by merely the color of his skin. I mean, if we do that, we want to be so careful. The anti-racist struggle is one of embracing humanity, all people. It is to disregard the color of a person's skin, because that's the racist trick, isn't it? They look at us and say, because of your color of your skin, you can't think straight. You cannot learn. You are prone to violence. Let's jail you and everyone who looks like you. Let us not give you a proper mortgage. Let us send your children to the worst schools because of the way you look. Let us treat you differently.
Well, that's systemic racism. That is systemic racism, as we've seen here in the US, where from the banking institution to even credit score and mortgages, people would say that there's a lot of racism involved in that, because it just put black people at a disadvantage in a lot of places, and it's systemic. It's like it's embodied into the system.
It is. Now, to say that merely because a black person and a white person have an altercation, that there are racial overtones without any utterances from the white person toward the black person, I think that's a bridge too far. So every time we have a confrontation between a black person and a white person, I mean, that to me is where this is going. That's a slippery slope. We cannot walk down that road. It is a dangerous road. Dangerous road. We should not walk down that road. And I think that comes from people who, I want to tell you, I lived in New York for many years. I lived in San Francisco. I lived in Seattle, lived in Georgia, Kentucky. I never had anybody use the N-word toward me. And then I went up to Massachusetts, to very liberal Martha's Vineyard. My ex and I had a property there. And I went up to Martha's Vineyard, and I was pulling into a supermarket, and someone thought that I should have stopped. And there it came, the N-word. I mean, I was shocked, right? I mean, sure. So I, like I said, I know the scent of this thing before it shows itself, Brother George.
Right.
And just because a black person and a white person have an altercation. And I think it's because of the moment we are in. The moment we are in has influenced people who have not experienced racial prejudice to think that every bad encounter maybe has a tinge of racism. So I'm going to blame CNN.
Right.
I'm going to blame CNN.
Well, let's mitigate. Let's talk about the things that we know, because we're talking about this, and this is not racism, and he's not a racist, but we really don't know what is in the person's heart.
Absolutely.
We don't know. But let's look at the things that we know for a fact. As it states at the moment, the police came. They didn't witness, but they saw what was at the aftermath of an incident where someone looked as if they was beaten up, probably bloodied. I don't have a actual photograph of the scene how Mr. Smith looked at that point in time, but it looked as if someone beaten up, assaulted in some kind of way. Is it normal for the police not to make an arrest if they're on the scene and obviously see something like that? should they wait to make that arrest, or should they make that arrest immediately?
But it happens all the time because somebody says, I did not touch him. Yes? But the police say, listen, take this, go to a medical, go to a hospital, go to a doctor, and bring it back. Because because we cannot lay charges without evidence.
Right.
If my client is involved in an altercation and the police charges that person with harm or wounding, and there is no medical document to support it, my guy walks. That case is going to get thrown out. The magistrate is going to throw it out right away. Where's the evidence? So
right.
the medical evidence is crucial.
It's crucial, that I understand. Now we're hearing that happened. So he came back, and he have this evidence, and the doctors outlined the different thing that was wrong with him. But then we heard another side of the story. The defense is that no one touched him. So how
I heard that too. I heard that. You know?
How do we put this whole together?
You have two people who said that they saw the entire thing, and one man said nobody touched Mr. Smith. I mean, this thing is going to have to play out in the courthouse where the evidence it will come to the fore. It's an interesting case, and I'm just saddened by the fact that it has been blown into this racial quagmire that we see happening mainly in the United States. To me, it's very unfortunate, because this is just a normal dispute between two people over. No, maybe there was an assault. Maybe there was battery. Maybe there was causing harm. I don't know, because the people who were there, at least one of them, hotly disputes that there was any altercation between the dog owner and Mr. Smith. So we'll have to let the evidence come out in the court. But I can say, from what I have discerned, that racism, that dog should not be barking here. Forgive the pun.
Okay, all right. Again, guys, we can open up the phone lines for you to call in 718-701-5720 if you have any questions pertaining to that incident. If you want to ask the lawyer anything pertaining to that particular incident, we did have Mr. Derek Sylvester, who is the lawyer representing Evans and his wife, Evans, actually, in this particular case. Did you get a chance to see that ride along?
I did not get to see the video, but Derek is a fine lawyer, outstanding lawyer. So I'm sure his clients would get the best representation that they can in this case. Fine lawyer.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're going to watch this one very closely. But here's something that you're directly affiliated and involved with. Yesterday, we heard of a police-involved shooting in Guave. With all that's happening, it was the last thing that anybody really wanted to hear. We saw what happened, the eruption in Trinidad and Tobago, police shooting there. This is a time where you don't want to hear this. And when my producer sent this to me, I was like, where this happened? She said in Grenada, people was blocking the street, which was a knee-jerk reaction as to what happened. And I couldn't believe that this incident happened there. Give us a ball-by-ball explanation as to what happened from your client perspective. Your client being the young man who was shot in the leg by police.
Well, let me say about the reaction of the people in Guave. I would not characterize it quite the same way you did, respectfully. I would say it was a show of outrage, because the young man is a national footballer on Grenada's national soccer team. He is an avid athlete, 24 years old. The only place you'll ever find this young man is on the cricket pitch, the soccer pitch, the basketball court. That's his life. I said today he has never spit on a pit bull or a pot hound. He's not the young man who anyone can say has used any words to the annoyance of anyone. What we are told is this: And this is the eyewitness account of the mother and her son. 6:15 in the morning, she hears a commotion in her yard, voices. She steps outside, she sees 3 policemen coming up her landing. She has a small veranda. It's a humble home in Gun Battle Grove on Longham Road, just above the hill, behind the Lance, for those of you who are familiar. And she asked them, well, can I help you? Because you see, some officers had been there 2 weeks ago to see, to inquire about her son, her eldest son, not the youngest one. She has 2 boys. And she said to them, well, why are you here to see my son? That was 2 weeks ago. Why are you here to see my son? They said, we want to see. She said, tell me, why do you want to see him? They left. Sunday morning, yesterday, 6:15. 6:15. Sunday morning, she sees 3 officers coming to her house. So she says, good morning, officers. Can I help you?
Officers? Were they uniform officers?
Plain clothes.
Plainclothes officers.
Plain clothes.
Did they identify themselves as police officers?
Well, in Grenada, you know who a policeman is. So she knew they were police people.
Okay.
She knew that. She knew all 3. She knew 2 of them by name, and she certainly knew them.
Okay.
They were from the Grove police station.
Okay.
You know, in Grenada, policemen don't carry badges. All right. So she recognized them, and they said, we're here to see your son. She said, well, you were here 2 weeks ago. What do you want to see him for? By this time, one officer is on the landing. That is the top step. Her veranda, and those of us from Grenada are familiar with the little gate in front of your veranda in front of your house. They said, we're coming in to see a son. And a female officer, follow this carefully, please. A female officer tries to push her gate open. And she said, no, you can't do that. And she held onto her gate. The female officer then pushes Mrs. Charles. Well, as any good homeowner would, she pushes her back. You can't come into my house. I don't care who you are, without showing me any document signed by a judicial officer for you to enter my home.
No warrant? Was any warrant presented?
Absolutely not. Not a sheaf of paper. Nothing shown. The only thing the officer was carrying was a pair of handcuffs. And they showed it to her. She said, you cannot come into my house like that. And the officer pushes her. She pushes the officer back. Her eldest son, the one who the police allegedly want to interview or arrest, comes out of the house. And he says, whoa, what's all this noise about? And why are you pushing my mother like this? Everybody is talking all at once now, as you would imagine. The police officer is speaking loudly. The mother is speaking loudly. The son who has just come out holds on to the gate as well. He said, no, you can't come in here. Do you have a warrant? What is it that you want? What do you want? A moment later, less than a second later, the other son, Jamal, hearing the commotion, gets up, steps, he's standing in front of the door. Crucially, none of the officers are on the veranda. They are outside on the landing. She says to them, leave my yard. Jamal, who was just awakened, said, hey, wait a minute. One hand is on the doorknob. And he's like, what's going on here? Before the last syllable is uttered, a policeman pulls his gun and shoots the boy in his thigh. That policeman is not in the veranda. He is not within stretching distance of Jamal. In fact, Jamal is standing behind his mother. Behind his mother. When the policeman fires the gun, the mother screams because she thought she was going to be shot. So close was she to her son. And so the boy on being shot says, "Oh God, mommy. Oh God, daddy," and collapses in a pool of blood. The policemen panic. They drop the handcuff, run down the stairs, and stand in the yard, stupefied. The neighbors, I mean, say you what you want about Guelph or anywhere in Grenada, we don't wake up to gunshots. The neighbors, having heard the sound, wonder what the hell is going on. Because what do they hear after the gunshots? The natural thing, a mother screaming because she sees her son collapsed on the ground in front of her with a bullet wound and blood pouring onto her veranda. The neighbors rush in from everywhere. They raise the young man. And Junior, this is where it gets. I mean, this is outrageous. The police do not render any aid to the young man. This is.
Were there any eyewitness besides the family, besides anyone of the family? Were there any eyewitness that saw the altercation? Because the
no, just the mother. They came. No, this is a Sunday morning in Guelph or in anywhere in Grenada at 6:15.
Were there an altercation?
None at all. There, except for the mother. Remember, the officer who fires the weapon was not the one who was being. It was a female officer and the mother that was screaming at each other. You know, you can't come into my house. Yes, I can. We're the police. You can't come in. And the other son, the elder son, saying, "Hey, you can't come in. Stop pushing my mother." And the young boy who comes to the door and say, "What is going on? What's going on?" The officer who shoots him is more than 6 feet away, outside of the veranda, not on the landing, on the treader before the landing. So he is standing, in fact, behind the female officer. He is not. The eldest son said he saw the officer pull out his gun and, as though in slow motion, that's how these things happen, if you recall them. He sees the guy pull out his gun, and before he could react, his brother is shot. Now, both mother and the eldest son were interviewed separately by two different officers who put all sorts of questions to them this morning. I should say this afternoon, around noon or so, when we did the interview in the police station. And their stories match word for word. You know, you can only, you think you can prevaricate until an experienced police officer starts questioning you. And the truth ultimately will emerge, as it did. I think this is the unassailable truth coming from the mouth of Mrs. Charles and her son of what happened. Because the police dropped their handcuff. They did not even retrieve the shell from the 9mm that went into this young man's leg. They stood and then they went into the vehicle. The crowd lifted the young man and put him in that vehicle. There were no police officers who came out and say, "Let's take him to the station," the medical station, that is. Let's take him to the hospital. They rendered no aid. None. I think this is, to me, this is the most egregious part of what happened that morning. You know, it could have been an accidental discharge of a weapon. Let us say. That the facts don't bear that out, mind you. I'm not saying that. But the police, who are charged with protecting life, did not render aid to this young man. You don't have to believe me. The videos are on social media. Everybody could see it.
Well, there's no video of the actual incident. The police
But of the young man, of who aided that young man and rode in the back of the vehicle with him to take him to the station, to the medical.
Yeah, we have that video.
Yeah.
No provocation. Absolutely, you say no provocation. Were there previous incident between that police officer and the young man that was shot? Were there
never. That young man is, as we say in the courts, a stranger to the law. He is you see, that's why the community reacted in the way they did. They know young Jamal. They see him playing cricket. They see him play. If you want to find Jamal Charles, just go to a sporting event. If you want to know anything about him, say sports. He's a cousin of Karani James. Yes? Sports is Jamal's life. That's his life. And the community in Guave know this young man as an outstanding young man. So what you see was not a knee-jerk reaction. It was justifiable outrage by the community based on what happened to Jamal yesterday morning.
The police are also contending that they were threatened by the young man and asked to get out of the yard, otherwise they would chop out their neck.
I expect the police to say anything at this point. Anything. I expect the police to say anything. Can you imagine here in Grenada, someone, I mean, is it, come on, anybody saying to the policeman, get out of my yard, I'm going to chop out your neck? We have an interesting law in Grenada. It is, in our criminal code, it's 133B. Not like the United States, where you could say anything you want to anybody. Not in Grenada. If you say to someone, your mother is a so-and-so, just two civilians talking to each other. 133 of our code says, if that person is annoyed, they go to the station, you are arrested and charged and brought before the magistrate. It's on our law books. In fact, it's the most common charge in the lower courts. It was my first case in Grenada. Two fellas were talking on a gravestone and a fella passed by during a funeral, of all things. And one says, that old thief, look at him there. And the guy said, who, you talking to me? And he said, of course I'm talking to you. He was charged, brought to the magistrate's court, found guilty, and had to pay a fine of a few $100s. Can you imagine a civilian, because all Grenadians know this, every single Grenadian know this law. It's what makes this place such a special place. So we don't have any violence and crime in Grenada. Low amount of crime. I think it's because of laws like this. I was fighting this law because, you see, I had American sensibilities without understanding the cultural context of the law. There is no person in their right mind who says this to a police officer and does not expect to be arrested. Not in Grenada. Every single policeman will arrest someone who says, I am threatening you with deadly bodily harm or any kind of harm. In fact, you could call the police a jackass. He will arrest you. Here in pure Grenada, I can assure you of that. And for a young man who has no history whatsoever, this is not the truth. And even if it is the truth, let us suppose it is. Is that a reason to shoot him? When you are more than 6 feet away, he's not within stretching distance of you. He's standing behind his mother. You shoot him? No, this one is I can't. When people express outrage, I well understand it. I well understand it. So the community is free to express their outrage in any way they want. That is their choice, because these events are outrageous. Let me say further, Brother George, I know the police officer who shot him. That police officer is a veteran. He's a professional. He's somebody that I respect in all my dealings with him. My first encounter with him was when he interviewed a client in Sateres in the station. Someone who stole money, over 14,000 US dollars, from an old man. And my client was able, after the questioning, to admit and then return the money. In that case, that policeman behaved like the professional that most officers in the Royal Grenada Police Force exhibit. I don't know what, but something went wrong with that officer that morning. I don't know what it is, but it has to be more than just someone using words that caused him to fire his weapon. He is not within touching distance of the person that he shot, because he's not on the landing. He's not on the same level with the veranda. The gate is closed. He is on a treader below the landing. So I want to know what happened.
Right. Someone was asking the question as it relates to the police presence there. They were obviously there to detain, not necessarily to search the premises. With that fact, do they need a search warrant to detain an individual?
I'm sorry, Brother George. A search warrant to detain?
No. We're saying that the police was on the scene. The police was there and they did not have a search warrant.
Correct.
But if the presence, if the reason for being there is to detain the individual, do they need a search warrant to detain someone?
No. Let me tell you what normally happens here in Grenada. There's an allegation that an offense has occurred and that I am a suspect. Normally, police officers would call you and say, or they send word for you. Say, listen, we need to speak to you. Can you come down to the station? And the person would say, sure, I'm coming down. Today, for example, when we were at the station, the police officer who was investigating the alleged offense that brought them to Mrs. Charles' house said to me, listen, I need to detain her son, the eldest son. And I said to him, sure, but listen, let's do it tomorrow, because he has to go see his brother. And he said, fine, sure. This is par for the course here in Grenada. You want to speak to someone, you have no reason to believe they are armed, it's not a violent offense. You just call that person and say, hey man, come down to the station, we want to have a word with you. You discuss the charge, just like I guess they do in small towns in America, right? You come down, they discuss it with you. You tell them where you were or where you were not. They discuss they determine the veracity of what you're saying. That is that you were not present, and then they let you go or they arrest you. And you, in such a case like this, the offense for which it is alleged the brother was involved with, because it's just an allegation now. And I'll be at the interview tomorrow morning, because I'm not going to let that man go into the station by himself. It's just an allegation.
And that is separate. That's separate to the case? That is what they initially went there for.
That's what they went there for. Yes.
Right. Okay.
And
right.
And they simply had to tell the young, because they see this elder brother walking in front of the station every day. He's not someone who is evading the police. Normally, the police go to the house for the suspect when they tell him to come down, and he's evading them, and they can't get him. That's when they go. That's when they go to the station. But in ordinary circumstances, they don't.
All right, let's get some other voices on this right here. What seems to be, I mean, another conflicting story, because the police saying one, and then of course your client have another side of the story. There's some kind of middle ground which would establish itself in court. Another very interesting court case that I'm sure that we're going to be hearing in the next couple of weeks and months. Let's get some of the voices on there, guys. We open up the phone line again to ask about this particular issue. This particular issue in particular. So we open up the phone lines. The number that you call 718-701-5720. 718-701-5720. It's the law is saying that there was no provocation as it relates to the shooting of Jamal. The police came there. 3 police officers came there to detain, and in the process of not minor altercation over the gate, opening the gate, police officer drew his gun and shot Jamal in the leg.
Brother George, just let me quickly say that a person is entitled to the privacy of their home, and not just the house itself, but what the law calls the curtilage. The area around the house is part of the home for which they're entitled to their privacy. So without a warrant, the police could not even come up this lady's step, much less go into her veranda. So the officer who tried to go into her veranda without having a warrant to enter broke the law.
Well, that's what I'm saying again. That was the original question. Do they need a search warrant to detain?
Not to detain. No. Police don't need a search warrant to detain. They can call Jerry Edwin down to the station and say, Mr. Edwin, we have an allegation that you ran over this civilian. Can you please come down and talk to us? Or they can come to my house and say, listen, we have an allegation that you've committed some offense. Would you please come down to the station? Yes. No, they don't have to come into my house. Or if I say, you cannot, I'm not going with you, then they can say, okay, we'll get a warrant for your arrest.
Right.
I think that's the question you're asking.
Yes. I've got a call coming from Grenada on the WhatsApp. It's on my phone, so you guys might hear it a little muffled. Caller, you live? Where are you calling us from?
Hi, good night. I'm calling from Guelph.
Go ahead, Guelph. Go ahead.
Yes. I'm not sure. I think the police need some education as to how to deal with civilians, because most of them don't have. They don't know how to speak to the persons. I had some things with the police at the Guelph police station. I remember a couple months ago they just came to my home without a search warrant, and a female officer. She just wanted to enter my home, and I was asking her for a search warrant and so on, and she was pushing my door as if she wanted to break down my door and so on. I also had another matter where someone stole my passport. I spoke to the police at Guelph. They said that they was going to look into it. The next day I saw the officer. He told me, he spoke to the man, and the man said he don't know nothing about that. And that's the man he spoke to me. The man said he don't know nothing about that. That's how he spoke to me. And there was another time I had an issue. I was so scared of going to the Guelph police station because I never get justice when I go there. I had to report the matter in town for them to report it to Guelph, for them to open the case, because I went there and no one wanted to speak to me because they are friends with the person that I was going to report.
Yeah. All right.
So they need to be professional. They need training. They need a lot of training.
All right, caller. Thank you. I'll have the lawyer speak to it. Sorry for the background noise, guys. Lawyer, Mr. Edwin, you want to speak to what the caller just said?
No, I think that I think everywhere you'll find police. I tell you, being armed with the imprimatur of the state, not literally armed, but as a representative of the state, the first representative of justice, of the law. It's a powerful tool that policemen have. Sometimes it can lead to an attitude. Well, you've seen it. I mean, we're no stranger to it. We live in this world.
All right.
There are persons who have no clue how to handle the responsibility of being law enforcement officers.
Yeah. Caller, let me just ask you, please turn down your background audio. Turn down your computer or whatever you're listening us on. It's creating a feedback. Hello?
I can't put on Facebook. You don't have Facebook.
Yeah, you can listen to me on the phone. Listen to me on the phone. Hello?
So you can hear us asking, William?
Yeah. Go ahead. Go
I can
ahead,
hear,
caller.
but you won't be able to
Caller,
hear
you
what I'm
live. Caller, you live. You're live right now. So go ahead and ask the
Go ahead.
question. Okay. The caller hung up. Caller, you live. Where you calling us from?
Hi, Junior.
Yes.
Yes, it's me, Geneva. I have a question for the attorney.
Go ahead.
Is this the first time this attorney uses a weapon, or is this something that he have a history of doing? That's the way he approach people. And what type of training the police getting before they go into the police department? What type of training they getting?
Right. Thank you, caller. Good question.
Yeah,
Is it
there
the
have
first?
been allegations. I've heard the allegations that the officer in this case is prone to, well, let's be colloquial, he's trigger happy. I've heard that. I've heard that he has fired his weapon unreasonably and may have, well, not may, apparently he shot other civilians. I don't know if it was in the course of an arrest or whatever the case may be, but no, ma'am, this is not the first time that this officer has used his firearm and injured a civilian. As to the training that police receive, it's a good question. Outside of the normal requirements, perhaps there need to be something else. But I think we have to let the police professionals take that up with other professionals and see whether the training that they are given is adequate and whether the qualifications. You know, in New York City, you cannot be a police officer unless you have a college degree now. Right? Maybe there ought to be a basic education requirement for. I don't know what that line is in Grenada, but maybe that's something we ought to look at.
And what about the investigation? Because I'm hearing that the police say that this would be investigated. Are you comfortable with the police investigating this matter, or you think that it should be?
No. I am grateful that right off the bat, Commissioner Martin said that he is engaged. He has engaged all the resources of the Royal Grenada Police Force to conduct an investigation into this matter.
Okay.
That's a good thing. However, I don't think the police should investigate the police. I think that the Director of Public Prosecution, the Office of the Attorney General that conducts investigations and high indictable cases. I think it's the DPP that should convene an investigation, because if this policeman is found wanting, liable, culpable, guilty, the DPP has to prosecute him. I think that inasmuch, and I'm heartened again today, Superintendent Cohen, the man who leads the community relations department, he has given us the assurance that no policeman from Guelph will be involved in this investigation. And we're glad to hear that. But as I pointed out to him, it is, I think, important that justice must, and this is a phrase that lawyers are familiar with, and lay people too, justice must be done. But equally important, it must be seen to be done. We must have faith in the process.
Yeah.
And I think that the police investigating the police is something we ought to look at. Also, the police, the officer who was involved in this shooting has been placed on administrative duties and is no longer investigating crime until the completion of the investigation. Now, I think that we should go a step further in Grenada. This officer should be suspended with full pay, his weapon should be removed from him. He should not have a firearm. I don't think his pay should be cut. Not now. He has not been found liable. The investigation continues. But I think that to have the police investigating the police is something we ought to look at. And Superintendent Cohen said that this is, I think this case should be the benchmark for a new process to establish new protocol.
Right.
We cannot have the police investigating themselves.
As they say, reimagine police. We had another call on that. That's gonna be the last call on the WhatsApp. Caller, where you calling us from?
Nina?
Yeah, go ahead, caller.
Yeah, it is very sad. It is very sad, right? I have brothers and sisters.
Yes.
My mom alive, and the feedback on what I heard with all the videos on social media, it's sad. But it's sad. But at the same time, I watched the video, go in the village, bring down Jamal to the van.
Yes.
Left for all, people was in still anger, crying out for help. I did see after, I'm not sure if it's
okay, caller, you're kind of breaking up. You're kind of breaking up a little bit. Caller, I have I'm not really hearing the caller too well there. What is it? Security come out and say something about it. Someone just messaged. They say, "Hi, good night." That is my the opinion. They say, "Why is it that the Minister of National Security didn't come out and say anything about the incident yesterday?" And someone was also saying that the protest, the blocking of the streets, and all that civil disobedience, what happened yesterday in Guav, do you support what happened yesterday?
If that question is for me, as I said earlier,
okay,
a community's outrage,
yes,
justified. We had in New York, we used to call them days of outrage. Remember that, Junior? Days of outrage, where we would, after the police shot another black kid, we decided that we were going to take the Brooklyn Bridge and stop traffic. Who's going to tell us that we shouldn't express our outrage in that manner? Yes. So I would not tell a community how to react when they alone know what is going on in their lives.
Yeah, but just to temper down what happened in there, we saw them blocking the street. If someone were to travel from Victoria on an emergency, some pregnant lady or someone is severely injured, and the street is blocked, then it provide, it's dangerous. You can't get to the hospital. So
Junior, I cannot, Brother George, I cannot speak to how a community reacts in, you see, when you have an irrational act, particularly by a policeman, as the community perceives it, you cannot ask the community to react rationally. So that is a definition of outrage. You have to show your outrage. And I'm sure if someone comes in and says, listen, we're carrying someone that needs medical attention, we're human beings. I mean, I've been in situations like that when we've blocked the streets, and of course we let that person through.
Yeah,
of course.
Well, listen, thanks for taking the time to chat with us here. In conclusion, in this particular case, where do you see it going? What's the next step in this case? What could we look forward to, whether tomorrow or the days leading up, as it relates to Jamal and his case? And how is he doing, by the way?
That's where I was going to begin. Jamal is recovering, thank God. Had that bullet gone a few centimeters right, we would have been having a different discussion today. So we are, let me say for the family that it's a law-abiding people. Jamal's father is a retired policeman. His stepfather is a policeman. These are not people who are not law abiding. The young man is recovering at the hospital. Today, his mom brought in some clothes, and she says all Jamal is saying is, I really hope I could play sports again. I really hope I could run again. Um, um, this one is difficult, but we will await, but not for too long, the investigation to conclude. And we will let justice be the rightful bedfellow of truth. But we, as an advocate for the family, they deserve justice in this case. They do not believe that there was any good reason for their son to be shot by a policeman. There was no good reason. And if you look at the objective facts of the case, and you can decide that from the reaction of the police to the shooting, I think there is where the truth really lies. Then, so we will take the steps that are appropriate in the circumstance to see that justice is served in this case. We won't relent. We're not going to be satisfied until justice is served in this case, because it's
I guess the final question on that is, what is justice? Uh, what is justice to you? What is justice for the family? What would feel good?
well. Let's see. Let's see. We you see, nobody takes joy. There's no joy here. There's
Yeah.
no there's no good feeling. Even if the courts find this officer culpable, guilty of wrongful discharge of his firearm, there is no joy in it. There is no
Yeah, well, what is justice?
satisfaction in that.
I guess the real question should be, what is justice? But hold on, we have one other call on the line, and then we'll wrap it up. Caller, you live. Where you calling us from?
Yes, Junior, this is Mr. Elias Gilbert, yeah.
Hey, Slicky.
I just want to say, yes, I just want to say, Mr. Edwin, that's very first time, listening to him talk. Quite impressed. Remind me of my lawyer, Derek Sylvester. I remember earlier on, I just changing the topic a little. I remember earlier on, he said that he was in Manhattan when Morris was under house arrest. I just touching that topic because I was a rebel child. I was on the foot. I almost died. And this is something that hurt me up to today. I don't talk about. But what is his thought about, the revolution, if he had ever supported, who went in jail and come out? Just your opinion, a little 2 minutes before you wrap up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you are asking a lot of my personal history on this. My friend, I was a community activist in New York. By political orientation, I am a Pan Africanist. I struggled like many young men, and I don't come to this alone. We were children of the 70s. You see, our heroes were Muhammad Ali, Malcolm X. These are our genuine heroes, not rap artists, not musicians, but people who stood for the rights of other black people. And um, the years of the revolution, the irony is I spent those years in the U.S. military. And my friends, uh, after the demise of the revolution in the United States, all of them, to a man, wanted to see the 17 hung for their alleged crimes. And I would tell you, I included, until one day I was asked to write an article for a union paper in New York, the largest union paper in the United States. And I interviewed Jesse Jackson and the head of the Congressional Black Caucus, Walter Fauntroy, because I remember they said that killing these people in Grenada would be the equivalent of killing 100,000 Americans. And then I remember speaking to a young fellow, a contemporary named Martin Felix, and Peter David, and Chester Humphrey. I'd never forget those conversations. And Leslie Pear, because every October 1983, I used to do a radio program. And these people educated me on what had happened in Grenada. Because, of course, I am in America. And I am influenced by my friends who had a view of the revolution and its demise. Until I started speaking to Martin Felix, Peter David, Chester Humphrey, and Leslie Pear. And so I wrote that article when the Congressional Black Caucus in the United States and Jesse Jackson appealed for clemency. And that changed my entire perspective, where I went back and I looked at the evidence that was captured by the United States. And I did not know or hadn't seen my young friends, my school friends from PBC and GBSS who were serving long sentences at Richmond Hill for their alleged crimes. And it became clear to me, crystal, that it was impossible for those men who were alleged to be the ringleaders to have been culpable of the offense. And of course, they were exonerated by a court that also believed that. So that's my view, but that's 40 years ago.
Yeah.
That's 40 years ago. And we're moving ahead with a brand new generation of Grenadians. And Grenada has embraced the 17, and they are reintegrated into our society and outstanding members of our local community. So we've moved on.
All right. I mean, a little bit of your personal history there. We appreciate it. We appreciate your time. I know we went a little bit over, about a whole hour over time, but you're
I didn't realize
with us, and we have to wrap up. Sure. But thank you, Mr. Edwin. We're gonna again follow this case.
Yes.
See, and as much. I mean, if you have any updates on it, feel free to send us any update. We'll be happy to put it out there to the audience, because people will be asking and expecting information as it happens, and we appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Brother George. It's my first time actually looking at your program or listening, because only yesterday when you invited me, I didn't know about it. I'm neck deep in the law being a jealous mistress wouldn't give you time for anything else. So I am stuck in the law. But I urge your audience to follow closely our campaign to ban the practice of flogging. I have 2 cases in the High Court to outlaw the slave master's mode of punishment that is still on our books in Grenada. So I'll leave you with that, and thank you again for inviting me to your program, and good night to everyone.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much again, Mr. Edwin. We'll keep in touch for sure.
Yes, sir. Good night.
All right. Yeah, so that was Mr. Jerry Edwin on the live here. 2 hours. Give you guys back the full half hour that we took from the top of the show. Put it back in and give you an hour on top of that with Mr. Jerry Edwin. Guys, listen. This is complicated stuff, right? And we, on Ridealong, we're not going to get all the answers. We're going to get one side of the story. But as we rightfully know here, we know this here more than any place else. There's actually 3 sides of a story. There is his side, there is she side, or there is one side, the left side, right side, the left side, and the middle ground side, or the truth, right? And that truth, that middle ground, is going to be established in court. Now, yesterday, we started to talk about a topic as it relates to criminal investigators and lawyers, defense attorneys, and why they take this case and should they take this case or whatever. Listen, at the end of the day, I respect a person for making their living. They could make their living however they want to make their living. And if a lawyer decides to take a case, that's what he went to school for. They paid a lot of money to get the bar, to go to law school and to pass the test. He ain't easy. So I ain't knocking any lawyer for taking any particular case. They could take whatever case that they want. All right. Some of them, some lawyers, you know, they sometimes we could think that they go overboard, but that is their job. Their job is to defend. That is their job. That's their defense attorney. That's what they do, right? So we shouldn't be upset when a lawyer take a particular case. His job, his responsibility is to defend his client. That's what he should do. That's what he have to do. Defend his client. Just to continue. He had to make sure that his client get as least time in prison as possible. And if the client didn't plead guilty, to make sure that he convincingly tell the judge or the magistrate or the jury and convince them that his client is not. And we cannot be upset when a lawyer do that. No matter what case we're talking about, whether it's the Covenant case, whether it's this particular case here, whether it's the Akim Andrew case, whatever the case might be, that is what they do. They're defense attorneys. Respect every man for doing his job. I couldn't be a defense attorney because there's a lot of people, when I know they're lying to their teeth, I ain't defending them. But that's me. That's me. Right? That's me. That's just me. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching for this long marathon of a program. I see Winsome messaging me and she says, "Hey, we're going over time. What's wrong with you? Can't you see? We're way over the time." Winsome, nobody go there if we go a little bit over time, you know. I mean, Lynn go get mad and think, but hey, she'll get over it tomorrow. Hit me up, guys. Don't forget, if you have a story to tell, inbox us at Ridealong Live, right? Inbox us at Ridealong Live. Tomorrow, we have a story that's going to break your freaking heart. When I saw it, man, my heart just pita-pata, pa. I felt like I wanted to cry. Hold on. Let me take this call. Caller, you live? Where are you calling us from?
Are you still on the air? I thought you was off the air. I'm sorry, man.
Nah, I'm still on. Yeah. Tomorrow we have a story with a young lady. So sad. This young lady she's paralyzed. Can't walk. And the condition that she's currently in, deplorable. Unacceptable. No human being should be living in that condition. She's going to tell us of the horror story just going from her house to her outdoor toilet. It's not nice. It's going to make you cry. Tomorrow's show will make you cry. But we got to do it anyway because we have to get the story out. So tomorrow you have a date with me, 6 p.m. right here on Ridealong Live. It's a really, really, really touching story. Just talking about it, right? It's bad. It's very bad. Very bad. Don't forget, guys, on the 25th, we have our Ridealong Bingo. We want you guys to go get your tickets for the Ridealong Bingo. Tickets $10. Anselm Douglas will be performing live, plus a host of other things. Wednesday, we have Fun Day. Immigration. Talking immigration. So if you have immigration issues, if you have your questions for Miss Funday, I want you to inbox your questions for the Wednesday program with the lawyer, immigration attorney. On Thursday, we have a program with myself and Natasha Wilson. We're exploring some situation. We have a story, a Dear Rider story that's going to knock your socks off. This week is a tough week, man. This week is a week that's going to put you in stitches and make you want to cry. We got to talk about it anyway. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Lynn, for managing the back end for me. Winsome Slocum, thank you so much. Deanne Fraser, Kibbs, thank you so much. Everybody. Don't forget, if you want you guys to support the Ride Along so you can become a supporter, click on that tab right there at the bottom where you click to become a supporter. And yes, become a supporter, because with your help, we could continue to bring stories like this out. Peace out, guys. Bye bye. Jackie Chaitan, good night. Good night, everybody. Bye bye.
You gotta be firm in this time, son. You gotta be strong in this time, son. I'm a survivor. I will survive. I will survive. And I'm a firm believer. I'll forever shine just to stay alive. That simple means it. Nobody can hold me back. Nobody can drain my energy. Nobody can hold me sick. I will not allow negativity. Nobody can hold me back. Nobody can drain my energy. Nobody can. Nobody can. Everybody show me some strength. No weakness, show me a lion now. Strength. No weakness, show them who we are. Strength. No weakness, show me a lion now. Everybody strength. No weakness, show them who we are.
Ready now, ready now. Yeah, 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 yeah. Hear me now. I never bad mind nobody yet. I never fight down nobody now. I never try stop nobody breath. That is not in my nature, no, no, no. I never see people with them things and vex them of it. Especially when they work hard for it. But it have some people, soon as they walk through your door, they put a stumbling block in your road, your road, your road. Your road, your road, your road. They practice evil, they think we don't know. And some of them close, they close, they close. They close to you. I'm telling you, enemies from the borderline. We're not blind, we don't stop them long, long time. Yes, enemies from the borderline. Enemies from the borderline. So remove yourself. We don't want a friend from them. We don't want to drink from them. We don't want to think from them, from them, from them. So remove yourself. We don't want a friend from them. We don't want to drink from them. We don't want to think from them, from them, from them. I'm telling you, don't have no time for no talking. Only have time for making moves. I don't carry feelings. That is too much of a heavy load. I never sell out my friends. That's not something I don't practice. Too many actors and actresses. Yeah. But it have some people. Soon as they walk through your door, they put a stumbling block in your road, your road, your road. Your road, your road, your road. They practice evil. They think we don't know. And some of them close, they close, they close. They close to you. I'm telling you, enemies from the borderline. We're not blind. We don't stop them long, long time. Yes, enemies from the borderline. Enemies from the borderline. So remove yourself. We don't want a friend from them. We don't want to drink from them. We don't want to think from them, from them, from them. So remove yourself. We don't want a friend from them. We don't want to drink from them. We don't want to think from them, from them, from them. I'm telling you, I never bad mind nobody yet. I never fight down nobody now. I never try stop nobody breath. That is not in my nature, no, no, no. I never see people with them things and vex them of it. Especially when they work hard for it. But it have some people, soon as they walk through your door, they put a stumbling block in your road, your road, your road. Your road, your road, your road. They practice evil, they think we don't know. And some of them close, they close, they close. They close to you. I'm telling you, enemies from the borderline. We're not blind. We don't stop them long time. Yes, enemies from the borderline. Enemies from the borderline. So remove yourself. We don't want a friend from them. We don't want to drink from them. We don't want to drink from them, from them, from them. So remove yourself. We don't want a friend from them. We don't want to drink from them. We don't want to drink from them, from them, from them. I'm telling you, man, your belly.
Life is a ride. Life is a ride. Life is a ride. Life is a ride along. Welcome to the experience. Welcome to the journey. Welcome to the journey. A movement. This is Ridealong Live, where everyone has a story to tell.